Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Samuel, founder of a revolutionary medical sales training and mentorship program called the Medical Sales Career Builder, and I'm also host of the Medical Sales Podcast. In this podcast, I interview top medical sales reps and leading medical sales executives across the entire world. It doesn't matter what medical sales industry, from medical device to pharmaceutical to genetic testing and diagnostic lab, you name it, you will learn how to either break into the industry, be a top 10% performer within your role, or climb the corporate ladder. Welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. And remember, I am a medical sales expert sharing my own opinion about this amazing industry and how it can change your life. Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Samuel, and today we have with us another special guest, and he goes by the name of John Crowder. Now, John is not an unfamiliar face here at the Medical Sales Podcast. He is a thought leader in how to be the ultimate healthcare sales professional, and he's behind integrity selling. And today we're going to dive into some of the critical things that affect sales reps. More namely, the 4 critical issues in healthcare sales. How to develop trust with your customers, and how do you stay emotionally engaged as a sales rep when you're constantly in the field each and every day? These are the kind of things that you absolutely have to listen to. If you want to break into medical sales, you got to know this stuff. If you're in medical sales, you better know this stuff. So as always, we do our best to bring you guests that are doing things different in the medical sales space. And I really do hope you enjoy this interview. Okay, let's start from the top because I love this. Give us the four issues you've seen in healthcare that the white paper was on, and then let's go deep into each one.
Okay.
Please give us the 4 again.
So it was access is one of them. The other one is people aren't able to sell disruptive technologies because the customer is at risk when they change their practice, when they start using a new product. The customer takes all the risk. So if all I can do is provide them product information, then I can't help them overcome the barriers they have of changing the way they practice for 10, 15, 20 years. Service is not selling. And then there's another piece that kind of mixes in all of this, and that is human beings. And this is where we can talk about the neuroscience of selling. All of that training that we do, all that technical information, all that product information, all that happens right up in your cerebral cortex, the logic center of your brain. And we like to think that people make decisions there, but in reality, it's not how people make decisions. 95% of decision-making happens in the cerebral cortex. And so as we overload these reps with technical information and they think that's going to sell, and they get across from a client and the client nods their head and they say, yes, I love this, but they never take action. Why is that? That's because their limbic system, their emotional centers of their brain are saying, I'm cautious here. Something's not right. There's too much risk. There could be a bad outcome. It's going to take a lot of work. There are all these emotional things that can paralyze you. It's the good old fight or flight, right? Our primitive brains are the same, regardless of how smart or how well trained we are. So what's happened? Yeah. I'm getting some sound bites.
We're gonna go nuts on this, John. But I want to capture the overall premise first.
Okay.
So you said 4 items. Let's name them one more time. Okay. The first one was access. What was number 2?
Access. Number 2 is you need a different skill set to sell a disruptive technology. Right?
Okay, so different skill set.
Right.
To sell
what we call a disruptive technology.
Okay. What's number 3?
Or innovation. Number 3 is that providing a service isn't selling.
Providing service isn't selling. Okay, and what's number 4?
And number 4 is this emotion versus logic piece, where we ignore the emotional piece of human beings when they buy because we're so
emotion versus logic.
Yeah.
We ignore emotion. Okay.
Yeah.
Now we're getting somewhere. Yeah. All right. So let's start with access. So, first of all, you describe these as the 4 issues of healthcare, or how do you describe these?
These are 4 critical issues that are facing healthcare salespeople today.
4 issues facing healthcare salespeople. Okay. Now let's get into it.
Yeah.
Access. Break it down.
Great. So what we've seen in every data point is that access over the last 30 plus years has been declining. But we get this subset of people that say, well, that doesn't apply to us. And so we've got to be able to draw a distinction between where is access really becoming more and more strict.
Sure.
And who are those that have access but don't feel the pressure of not having it? And what are they doing? So without a doubt, if you're not a clinical person or somebody that can support a case in the OR, in the cath lab, and one of the labs where they do procedures, if you're not selling that kind of equipment, a lot of times your access can be very, very limited. It can be very difficult,
Sure.
even if you're in any type of patient care area. So we know that that's happening to most people that aren't patient oriented in their day to day. For those that do have patient access, quite often, they fall under the realm of providing a service. They're in there to support cases, to give information, to talk about what's the right thing to do in this particular situation. And while that's incredibly important to the sales process, providing great product service and support, it's not really selling. Selling is a change process. True selling is when we change somebody's pattern of behavior. And standing in the cath lab or in the OR or whatever it is and supporting a case doesn't necessarily lead to that change.
So you described two audiences: the ones that just don't get access, the ones that claim to get access but don't really have access because all they're doing is a service the service piece of whatever they offer. Mm-hmm. Is there a third group that is doing more than just providing a service that is successfully getting access?
Yeah. And I think it's the people that know how to really sell. I think it's the people that understand that your value proposition for today's healthcare customers has got to be beyond product information, service, and rapport building. If you can provide a service, they're going to let you in because they don't have to pay a nurse to do what you're doing. The company's paying your salary, right? And so that's great. Good for them. They're going to let you in there all day long. The issue is that those that can get in there and say, look, where is it that you are right now and how you manage your patients, and where do you want to be, and how can our products help you make that transition? And they can have those conversations, and then they can move that conversation beyond what is a logical thought process to an emotional process. So people are either not fearful of change or excited about making the change. And if we don't bridge those gaps, then people often don't want to see us or they won't move forward.
So here's my question, because, the first thing I go to when I hear that is compliance. That's the first place I go to. And I think, okay, if I'm a 1099 rep, to John's point, I better be using the flexibility I have to be more of a resource to my customer and establishing, hey, how can I help them with their business? But if I work for a very large organization that has a pretty regimented process around what I'm allowed to say and not say to my customer to engage business, how am I supposed to do what John is advising and be even more of a business support to my customer?
Yeah. So I think it starts with the companies changing and how they train people. If we want people to have more impact, if we want them to have the type of dialogue and exchange that's value oriented for our customers, that increases utilization and drives market share, then we have to give them the skill set. We can't just overload them with product information. It's not enough any longer, right? They have to have a different skill set. They have to be able to identify what are the problems, challenges, and goals of my customer. What solutions can we offer? Can I close for that next step? How do I move this forward? And all of those quite often in today's world are not taught because in the training environment, the trainers are overwhelmed with how much technical information they have to teach. And they're afraid, right? This is an industry that has a lot of oversight by the government, appropriately so, right? And we know that companies have been not burned at their own fault for saying and doing things they shouldn't have been doing to the tunes of hundreds of millions of dollars. So these companies draw a pretty strict line on what people can and can't say. But we're not talking about product information and varying from that. What we're talking about is giving people a skill set that allows them to connect much better with their clients, to bring more value, to solve more problems.
So here's my big question then, John. I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Sure.
Give us an example of what it looks like to do what you're saying that's contributing to this declining access, and give us an example of what it looks like to be on the other side and be doing it the right way.
Yeah, I love it. I'll give you the classic example that we deal with all the time, and it doesn't matter whether you're in medical device or pharma. It happens the same.
Sure.
You're launching a new product. I go in, we're all excited. We're going to launch this new product, and we go out and we see all of our customers and we give them all the information. And we're going to get early adopters. We're going to get people that can put this piece together, and they're a little bit more aggressive in their behavior pattern and maybe accept it. But there's a group of people out here, probably 60 to 70% of the people, that product information is just not enough. I don't think often we consider what we're asking these providers to do. Imagine I'm treating a patient a certain way for 5, 10, 15 years. And then you come in with a new product and you ask me to change to this new product. I have one question for those reps. In that situation, who's taking all the risk? It's not the rep, it's the provider. And in turn, that provider's patients when they change the care that they deliver. And so what happens is that if we don't recognize that and help them come through those issues and address those issues, identify and address what their concerns are, what their hesitations are, what they need to know, and provide solutions around a new way to treat a patient, they'll revert right back to their comfort zone. It's human nature. It's got nothing to do with whether you're a physician, a lawyer, or a pilot, right? It's just how human beings are wired.
So give me. Okay, so then I guess, because what I want to hear is, I want to hear what good sounds like.
Yeah.
I want to hear, what is the rep that walks in with that agenda that you just described, where they're selling the right way because they're getting to the core of how to move their physician's business. What does that call sound like?
Yeah.
What are they saying differently that the rep that's just going in there vomiting, clinical data? Yeah. How do they differ?
So first of all, we have to change our mindset or our view about what selling is. Unfortunately, people's view of selling is it's information delivery. You come into training, you have that foundational thought process, and then we give you all this information. It only strengthens that belief system that selling is giving information. So first of all, let's back up and say, what is selling? Selling is an exchange of value, an exchange of information, and we're going to identify needs, opportunities, offer solutions, and move it forward. Sounds simple, harder to execute because we have 5, 10, 15, 20 years of behavior stamped into our mindset. So we have to be very cognizant. And so one of the things that we've got to do is...
I hope you're enjoying today's episode. And I want to let you know our programs cover the entire career of a medical sales professional. From getting into the medical sales industry, to training on how to be a top performer in the medical sales industry, to masterfully navigating your career to executive level leadership. These programs are personalized and customized for your specific career and background, and trained by over 50 experts, including surgeons. Our results speak for ourselves, and we're landing positions for our candidates in less than 120 days in top medical technology companies like Stryker, Medtronic, Merck, Abbott, you name it. Would you run an Ironman race without training and a strategy? You wouldn't. So why are you trying to do the same with a medical sales position? You need training, you need a strategy, and you need to visit evolveyoursuccess.com, fill out the application, schedule some time with one of our account executives, and let's get you into the position that you've always dreamed of.
You have to really have a great attitude. You've got to have a great pre-call plan. You've got to know what you want to do when you accomplish in there, when you go in there. And it starts with, if you have a particular patient type that you're talking about, which most of us do, right? How are you managing these patients? What's going well? What's not going well? If you could choose it, if you could change it, if you could improve it, what does that look like? Because we've got to get people understand that there's a better option out there. So that's just one of the phases that we take people through. And then of course, we've got this emotional piece. Ultimately, when it comes to sales professionals though, and it doesn't matter, again, what the sport is or what the skill is. I'll give you an example. I couldn't learn to fly an airplane by sitting in a classroom and watching a video and listening to an instructor for a day. Right? It's not going to give me the skill set that I need. So one of the things that often happens, and the industry does a wonderful job at spending billions of dollars on training that's ineffective. Why is that? Because 75% of what you learn in a workshop, you lose within 48 hours if you haven't either been executing that or being coached on that skill. You're going to lose it all. So we spend all this money training folks and there's no pull through. There's no back end. How do we change your skill? So there's a process that happens over time. And there's some variables that are very important to change how adults develop new skill sets.
Okay. So I'm tracking, but I'm going to challenge it here, John.
Go ahead.
So right now I'm hearing, you got to ask these great, basically probing questions when you walk into an office. Mm-hmm. I've had the opportunity to be part of many training programs. I've trained in a number of many training programs, and I literally talked about some of the material that these are folks are doing, like what you're saying, like asking positive probing questions. having a sound pre-call plan and making sure your pre-call plan matches whatever that leader in that practice is trying to do. Mm-hmm. That sounds very fundamental. What is it that you're identifying that's still problematic in the way it's being taught today?
So a couple of things, when we approach, based on how people are trained, right? We often approach them with a very product, company, and self-centric approach because that's what we're taught. We're given the tools to go in and talk about our product. So we need to change that. I think the other piece to this is, and revisit with me what you just said. I'm sorry, Samuel. I know you'll.
Well, I'm saying that asking probing questions. I mean, you better be doing that. That's not. So, shouldn't be new news to any rep that's worth their salt out there that's performing in the field right now.
Yeah, you're right, Samuel. And here's where the roads diverge. That's a great question. So what we knew for a long, long time, especially when you're selling a Me Too product, could be a cardiac stent, could be one of the pumps that the diabetics wear, could be a statin, right? Is that I don't have to really do much more than talk about the features and benefits of my product. So it all became a messaging campaign. And that's the way our healthcare customers see us, is that we provide product information and we see that as a value. Well, we knew after a while as an industry that wasn't going well. So what we did was we said, okay, we have to ask more questions. We have to engage them in dialogue. Well, if you spend any time in the field and you watch reps who aren't trained in how to have those conversations, they ask a bunch of inane questions. And it becomes just as irritating as message delivery. I don't need you to tell me 6 times about your statin. I got it. We know what statins do. So now you're going to come in and you're going to ask me a bunch of questions, but those questions are really oriented towards you, not towards the customer, not towards the patient. So in order to bridge this gap, the fundamental skill is, how do you ask consultative questions that are important to the doctor, important to the institution, important to the provider, so that they'll share with you, A, where they're at, but B, what good looks like. And once we've had that conversation, we have to have the skill set to overcome those emotional hurdles that will stop them dead in their tracks. So it's not just asking questions, asking true consultative questions based on how you're motivated, which is, let me put the patients first, right? I always tell my sales team, if you put the patients first, it comes through in everything you do, and your customers will see that in you, and you'll always have a job in this industry because you'll have respect. Now, the question is that's easier said than done. How do you have that conversation where you can demonstrate that skill? And that requires training. It requires retraining of some old habits, overtraining over top of some old habits. And again, it's going to happen over a period of time. I couldn't just teach you these concepts in a workshop. I could give them to you fundamentally, but then I'm asking you to execute something that you really don't have any experience at. And you may get frustrated, and very quickly you'll revert back to your old habits.
So then really, when it comes to the beginning of this with access, it's about asking the right questions. That's what we're talking about right now. Asking the right. There's a challenge in the industry where, with all the training reps are getting from their companies, they're still asking the wrong questions.
Yeah, quite often that's why. And so let me ask you a question. If you had somebody that could come in and bring you service to the staff, education, food, whatever it is, right? And support you in a case, and you put them on a schedule and you appreciate that. And you had somebody that was going to come in and solve a major problem and improve outcomes, improve patient care, improve efficiencies. Which one do you want to partner with more?
I mean, no question. Right. One.
Would you rather be known as, man, they really support us and give us great product information and great service? Or would you rather be known as, you know what, Samuel came in, he was a real change agent for us. He realized what our problems and challenges are. He identified where we want to go. He helped us build solutions that help us take us to where we are today. I can't tell you enough about Samuel, what a great guy he is. That's the skill set that we need, that we often don't train our folks with. And here's one thing I want to say is that the 2 best sales reps I've probably ever worked with in my entire life were both former nurses. Clinicians can make excellent salespeople, but they need to know the skills of how to make that transition, which is one of our topics. If you take a clinician and you put them in an OR or a cath lab and they're providing service, they're very comfortable. Many of them come from that environment, right? But here's where we change the dialogue with them. When you're a nurse working in a hospital, you're morally, legally, and ethically bound to advocate for that patient for better outcomes, right? Mm-hmm. So now that I'm working for the industry, now that I've moved over to work for one of these big companies, I don't want to feel like I'm advocating for the use of my product. So I don't. And so what we need to do is say, okay, well, you would advocate for that patient when you were a nurse. How do you advocate for the patient? Not for the pump, not for the use of your product, but how many lives you save, how many organs you save, how many outcomes you improve. That's a different discussion topic than standing in there telling somebody what wire to use or what screw to use or something like that.
What do you do? So with this, okay, and I have a couple questions. So with this approach, I'm assuming that your company and the training you guys offer and focus on allows people to do what you're talking about compliantly.
Oh, absolutely. Because we're not talking about products and patients, right? We're talking about problems and solutions, right? And you don't want to ever overcommit. Look, we recently walked away from a very big deal with a very, very big company because we weren't in a position to deliver on what they wanted from us. We were very much welcome and appreciated. So there's the same standard in healthcare, whether you're selling consultative service or training services, or you're selling a stent. We've got to stand behind our product, and we have a moral obligation there. But these conversations don't in any way impact what we're supposed to and what we're allowed to say. It's really a deeper, richer conversation than that.
Sure. And my next question then is, so we're doing all this compliantly. A more useful approach to get the right information from the customer to give a better service. What about when you walk into, you're a rep and you walk in to see one of your customers and they're like, look, I don't want to hear, look, I'm busy. What do you have? And just tell me what you got and let's move it forward.
Yeah.
How do you slow that provider down to do things the way that you're advising now?
Yeah. So, really, Samuel, that speaks to the crux of the problem. Because not only have we conditioned sales reps that value that your value proposition, your currency is the information you provide, but our customers have also become conditioned.
They've been conditioned to that, yeah.
So a couple things. Those type that are like that are generally fit in a particular behavior style. We call them doers, where they want their information in short, quick sound bites, right? But we teach techniques about how do you overcome that. And the reality is that you have to be very quick and to the point, but ask them questions that are important to them, right? Not important to you, not important to somebody else, but important to them. They'll give you time. Each time you do that with these kind of really what we call doer type, which are very action oriented, you begin to chip away and develop a deeper relationship with them. And hopefully over time, if you make enough points with them, they'll actually sit down and give you 15 or 20 minutes. It's a difficult, what we call behavior style to work with, but we teach very specific techniques on how do you connect with folks that think and see the world like that.
That's exciting. That's awesome, man. Those kind of techniques are completely invaluable. I just, one thing I see from our vantage point is you can't let your customer intimidate the way you sell, right? Mm-hmm. And just like you said, providers are conditioned now to give it to me quick, get out of my face. I got things to do. And everyone's feeding into that. Mm-hmm. You have to retrain your customer to say, wait, this rep is coming in. They have a whole different approach. I got to respect them because every time I let them talk, I get a world of value. So I love what you're saying there. Earlier, you mentioned disruptive tech, and you mentioned you have to develop a different skill set for disruptive tech. Can you define disruptive tech for us, for all the people listening right now that might not quite know what that means?
Yeah, it's really when a company brings something that's innovative to the industry. It could be a completely different way than they've been treating patients for a long, long time. And I think one of the biggest challenges, and we kind of touched on this, is that if I'm going to ask you to change your medical practice, it can't just be on logic and data alone. There's a lot of emotion and experience and comfort tied up. I'll give you a classic example, right? And that is when we started having large bore access in the cardiac cases, right? And so we went from having a small hole where we could much more easily control bleeding versus now these large bore access holes. Well, guess what? If you're asking me as a physician to do that and I'm not comfortable with that for a variety of reasons, right? Then I'm not going to do it. I'm going to stick with my old method. So if I don't have an opportunity to have an exchange with you about, hey, what would concern you about making this transition? If you don't make the transition, what's it going to cost you and your patients and your practice and your business, right? Okay, so what do you need to move from A to B? And it can't just be, again, the logical piece. It needs to be the emotional piece because that's what will either encourage them to move forward or keep them from moving forward.
Gotcha. This logical, emotional piece, What if you're dealing with that really just removed provider that just not, they're not giving you much. They're giving you time, but even with the time they give you, they're not giving you much.
Yeah.
How do you get them to a place to move them emotionally?
Well, there's, first of all, you got to build trust. And I think there are a lot of, they're nice people. Most providers are really nice people, and they're going to give you time. They know you're trying to do your job, but they probably see very little value in what we all do, right? Because of how they've been conditioned over the time. So we got to build trust from folks. And I think one of the things that is really, really crucial for all this is to be very sincere. Do I sincerely care? Do I give a dang about you and your practice and your patients? Again, that comes through in everything you do. Now, that doesn't mean that I can nice people to death, right? It's got to be more than that. It's a deeper conversation than that. And so what I want to do with those folks, and this is true for an introvert, and we'll talk about that population, because this is what happens is they come in and they're nice and they smile, and we think we have a good relationship with them, but they never change their practice. And that's because those people need to be asked about things that are important to them. Think about any product, no matter how shy you are, any product, any adventure, any skill, any vacation, and ask anybody that you've ever run into that's an introvert or rather shy, and ask them about that and see how they open up and share with you. So that's exactly what we need to identify and how we adjust our approach. What we need to do is meet our customers where they are with their behavior style and how they view the world. And if they're an analytical type, and if they're a, more an introvert type, then what we need to do is find out what is their passion and ask them about it. And guess what? They'll open up and they'll see you differently, but you have to be genuine about it. And then you have to have a means to an end. You can't just go in and ask questions because you want to get educated, because after a while, that's not of value to them. They may share because they're nice people, but the questions that we want to ask is what's important to them today, and where do they want to be in the next 6 months, 18 months, or whatever it is, and how can I help you get there?
Got it. Do you use things like the DISC assessment in your program?
Yeah, absolutely, we do. As a matter of fact, we call it behavior styles. It's a DISC assessment based platform. It's really the same. We've just licensed it in for it to be different. It's called Insights as well, and it's great. It's a really fundamentally very sound technique to apply in the sales process. You have to meet your customers where they are.
This is fantastic, John. Gosh, doing things this way, how quickly. So let's say the rep's listening right now and they're thinking, wow, John's onto something here. I want to get access to this kind of training. Mm-hmm. Somehow they get access to it. How long are we thinking? How long does this transformation usually take for a rep to be showing up the way they're showing up today, and then to be showing up after getting your training the way they're supposed to be?
A couple things. If you want to reference a book to read, we have a new book out called Listen to Sell. It is my playbook. It is excellent. It's actually a new edition of an older book called Integrity Selling for the 21st Century. And it's more up to date. And it's just a brilliant piece of resources. It's not the right thing to say. Edit that out, will you? So it's a great resource for people. But what happens how do we get people to change? Right. So first of all, we start with the mindset. Then we have to give you the foundational skills. That's what's in the book. That's the platform. That's your playbook, right? That's how you execute. Now you get 3 things from this. This is what our foundational skills look like. It's not just messaging, right? It's conversational, it's interactive, it's adaptive, it's all those things. Then we get a shared definition, right? And when we're talking about a team, everybody knows how we're talking on the same level. We all share the same common language. The third piece is the expectations of what good looks like. This is what a good sales call looks like. Now, you're not going to be there because you learned a different way to sell. It's going to take time for you. And that's where we come in with a different approach, because we lead a series of micro-learnings, 8 follow-up sessions. And we ask really 3 important questions of folks that have gone through this training. We give them a very specific set of skills to work on in a particular week. And when they come back with their colleagues, because now all of a sudden there's accountability, and we get around a campfire or a Zoom meeting, as you want to call it, right? And we ask them 3 questions, right? And before I tell you what those 3 questions are, I'm gonna take a pivot here. Adults learn by watching and doing, but the third and one of the most important pieces that's often missed is adults learn by talking, by verbalizing. Sure. When I say it, I own it. When you tell me as a manager what to do, you own those words. And if I can't repeat them back to you, if I don't say them with belief, then I'm going to do it when you're watching me, right? So the reason that I say that is because giving people an opportunity to verbalize is incredibly important for adult learning. So we get them in these follow-up sessions and we ask them 3 questions. What did you do well? What new skill did you execute well? That reaffirms. Now, this is when you literally hear their synapses training, Samuel. When you ask an adult, what'd you do well when I tried something new? And they tell you that, they're literally refiling or reconnecting their belief system of what good looks like. Then we ask them another question. It's really important. It's not what you did wrong, because that puts up defense systems, right? If I know what your expectation is of me and I went through it and I missed on something that I wish I would have done, we ask him, if you had to do it over again, what would you have done? What do you wish you would have done? So now all of a sudden, well, I'm not sure. So we're going to get to that point. They're going to own that when they say what they want to, but also their colleagues are going to, have you ever tried or did you think about? Now all of a sudden we're building esprit de corps across our team. Everybody's chipping in on the same common pathway, language, and expectation of what good looks like. And the third question is, what are you going to do next time? Next time you're in this situation, next time with that customer, you said this is what you did well. You said this is what you wish you would have done differently. And what are you going to do the next time? And when you take people through that and the adults share this experience with them, that's how you literally hear them growing and developing.
Okay. So with all that in mind, how long is the typical training? The average? I know you guys have a lot of customized stuff, but how long is the average training you guys have?
So our average training is probably 2 to 3 months. 2 to 3 months.
And so let's say I'm a rep and I'm performing mediocre, and I want to be a rock star rep. Access has been an issue for me forever, and I need to show up in a more powerful way. I take your training. 3 months have gone by. When should I start to expect a change in what I'm experiencing in my territory? Halfway through the training, at the end of the training, a quarter after the training? What do you typically see?
It's almost immediate, and it depends on your attitude and your skill. Now, I'll tell you why. When people go in with a completely different belief system and a completely different approach in the sales process, and they execute those fundamental skills really quickly right out of the box, their closes, their opportunity for follow-up. Now I'm not getting back on the schedule. When's the next time I can come by? When's the next time I can get in the OR? When's the next time I can get a case, right? You're not getting those. You're coming back because you've had a value exchange with a customer and they want you back. And it is cathartic for people to know that sales is that valuable, that you can have a different kind of a relationship and a different kind of impact in the people that you work with. It's selling is a mutual exchange of value. It's not something you do to people. It's something you do for people. And it's not confrontational, right? I'm not going to, confront you into why aren't you using my product? I'm going to collaborate with you. And if you think about human nature, right, there's certainly a small population out there that doesn't mind confronting docs with how they treat their patients, how they practice medicine. But most of us don't agree with that approach, especially clinicians. It's collaborative. Right? It's teamwork. Let's identify the best solutions. And now I feel completely different about the value I bring to my customer and in turn their patients.
I love that. So with the training you guys have, what do you hear from reps that have been doing some, think about the 10-year rep that's been selling the way they sell for who knows how long. What is the most common thing you hear from the reps that go through from those types of reps that go through your training?
Yeah, I say this with all humility, but in all sincerity at the same time, and it makes us all feel really, really good. I wish I would have known this 2 or 3 years ago. I wish I would have known this before, right? Because they know that they have limited value, and then so once they've exhausted that value, now my interactions with you become service and rapport building, and I like it, but I'm doing that because I want to feel like I'm working hard for my company and I'm bringing some value. And I can tell you that every rep that can't do this because they're not trained can do it if trained properly, bring a higher level of value to their customers. They just need the opportunity. I wish companies expected more or believed more in the ability of their teams. We train people to do this all over the world. It changes their careers. And I just wish everybody had that belief system as far as organizational training goes. We can do more and we need to do more because we need to have better relationships with our customers. We need to bring more value to them than what we're doing right now.
Absolutely. With this type of approach, does it create more administration, more time practicing, more time doing anything as far as being the best rep you can be? Or have you seen it maybe go the opposite way where it makes you more efficient? You actually end up spending less time doing administration and things like that to be the best rep
Yeah.
you
I think anybody that sells more knows that you have more admin tied to it. But here's the thing, right? You're not doing the frivolous things. When I realize and I understand how I can move an account forward, how I can move a practice forward, how I can move a doctor forward, and I get that down, I spend less wasted time in what I call the service vortex. People want to feel busy. They want to feel like they're earning their paycheck. So they'll do busy work. Well, guess what? When you learn to sell properly, when you improve that interaction, that relationship, when you start moving people forward, when you become a problem solver, you fixate or you gravitate towards those skills and away from the things. I just had a call yesterday, and the comment is that people are just going by the offices and they're doing the same old pattern that we talked about earlier. And that's because they haven't been able to identify or develop a skill that allows them to have a deeper, more meaningful connection with their customers.
Sure. Now, is this approach something you can only exercise when you're in front of the customer? Or can you do this through email? Can you do this through leaving a note with a provider that maybe has no access, is a no access rep provider? How do you, especially if we're talking about access here, how do you utilize this approach when you truly have no access?
Yeah, that's a great point. We actually teach a class on that. And so there's some very startling statistics on what clients, whether they're clinical or non-clinical, what they will read and when they will read them. We're talking about a text message or an email or something like that.
Sure.
And so what most companies do, and I get dozens and dozens of these a day, is they send the email and they talk about themselves and product and how long they've been around. And look, I don't have time for that. Right? That doer doesn't care about you. I'm going to be honest with you. I hate to hurt your feelings, but they don't care about you. Now, if you approach them with, I understand you're in charge of doing X, Y, and Z in this unit, and that your goal is this, right? All of a sudden, I've got your interest. I want to be able to share with you how we may be able to help you accomplish your goals. Now, that's a choppy way of me saying that you're going to change how you reach out to those folks. It's a skill. It's an acquired skill, right? You have to practice it just like you would hitting a golf ball or a tennis ball or whatever. But there are much more effective ways. When I get those emails that come across my desk that talk about their product and themselves or whatever, I just delete them. I don't have time for that. But if you tell me if I've got a leak in my roof and I get something and said, hey, I'm great at fixing roofs, I'm going to immediately gravitate towards that kind of a message. So if we have something that can deliver, solve problems, deliver on a promise, then they'll pick it up and take a look at us.
Wow. Right now, there are people listening right now that are just processing all this information that you're sharing right now, John. If there was one piece of advice you'd give our audience of active sellers right now, they could act on today, what would it be?
Yeah. Invest in yourself. You are capable of having dynamic, successful, positive customer relationships that change the way care is provided. Not changing from one product to another, which does bring value, don't get me wrong, but a much higher calling and a much higher purpose. You just have to invest in yourself. And so I recommend Listen to Sell. I think it's a great foundational book for you to understand the concepts and the mindset around having a different approach to business. What I will tell you is that it's liberating. It's cathartic for people because they see themselves growing. They see themselves in a much more capable way, and it helps you get out of a rut very quickly.
I love it. Before we close it up, I'm going to ask just one more question. I can only imagine that as you're teaching this approach, because it can be so new to even very experienced reps or just have so much more depth than a new rep that's already been trained that thinks they know what they're starting to know what they're doing anyway. What is the biggest challenge you've seen with adopting your approach, and how do they successfully get around that?
So, we have so many customers, and if I rattle them off, I will just say this: the three largest medical device companies in the world are our clients, right? The third largest bank and one of the biggest, this chemical company, right? They all use us because they know we work. So, what are the biggest obstacles? Well, two things, actually three things I'm going to share. Number one is that managers have to buy into this. And it can't be in a manager way. It needs to be in a coaching way, in a supportive way. And they need how to coach to these new techniques, right? How do you grow people outside of their comfort zone? And that's one of the things that I would say. I think the other one is that whether they're new or tenured, right? I think they get to the point where once they've taken the class, they realize that they could have done something much, much better, right? They could have in the past been approaching their business so much better. And the other part of this is just making sure that you repeat the skills so that you do come off with some fresh talent and a fresh way to approach your clients and a fresh way to engage. It's not just going to happen through sitting in a classroom. That's just not how human development happens. You got to have a coach that's committed to that, and it can't be punitive. It has to be very supportive, and we teach that part of it. How do you develop somebody outside of their comfort zone? That's a skill. That's setting expectations. Let's have a benchmark of what looks good. Let's know what we're going to accomplish. Let's go into the call and let's evaluate. When you come out of the call, who's the first person to talk? It's the reps. Hey, what went well? What'd you do that you're proud of? Applaud them, praise them. If you had to do it over again, what would that be? Well, I wish I would. I love that. That's a great idea. And of course, what do you think we need to do the next time? Same principles. That's how you get people out of their comfort zones and get them to develop with new people and new skills.
I love it. I love it. John, this was refreshing. As always, you bring in so much value when it comes to selling in medical sales. And thank you for this time today. One more thing that we got to do, that's the lightning round. Are you ready?
I am. I'm nervous from my responses last time.
All right. So 10 seconds, 4 questions. First question is, best book you read in the last 6 months?
The best book I read in the last 6 months is actually sitting right here. My brother got it for me. It's called Ghost of Honolulu, which is kind of weird, but it's about a Japanese American and the great patriotic duty that he did when he served in Hawaii during World War II. He actually was one of the founding members of what I would call the CIA, which wasn't around then, in Hawaii when it came to our interactions with.
And he fought against the Japanese.
He did. He was a Japanese American, and he came.
Wow.
And there's a lot of question on their loyalty. Yeah. I can imagine there were significant emotional pull on those folks, but this guy was really brave and believed in the just thing to do was support the American cause.
Wow, that's it. Yeah, now that's a fascinating perspective. I'd love to look at that. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, best TV show or movie you've seen in the last 6 months?
The best movie
or TV show last 6 months.
It's one of the fun things that my wife and I do. So right now, one of the hot things that we're watching is The White Lotus. Right?
Oh man, yeah, that's good. I know that one. That's a fantastic show.
Yeah. This, I think they're in their 4th season. Have you watched them yourself?
I've started watching the new season. And
yeah,
I got thinking enough.
Yeah. That's what we're interested in. There are probably a couple other series on there that we watch, but right now that's the one that we're.
Oh, that's awesome. Doing. That's awesome. Okay, and you know how it goes with this question. What is the best meal you've had in the last 6 months? Give us the item, the restaurant, and the location.
Oh boy, the last 6 months, I'm going to have to think about that. I wish I knew the names of the restaurants. I don't, because my wife usually picks them.
Sure.
I will tell you the place that I went recently was a place in Annapolis, Maryland called Level. And right downtown. Yeah, that's it. And had a nice meal there and would certainly entertain going back. But I'm not really picky.
We get it if we all go to Level.
Yeah, Level. I tell you one of the best sushi places I've ever been to, and a big fan of sushi, is there's a place in Annapolis, Maryland, again, where I live, called Joss, Joss, Joss Cafe, Joss Cafe. And it's excellent. It's some of the best sushi around, certainly in this area. And
Joss and Level.
Yeah.
And is there any item recommendations at Level?
No, I think in general, it was just a good overall.
Okay. Yeah. Received. And last but not least, what's the best experience you've had the last 6 months?
I think anything that you do with your kids is always fun. Watching them overcome an obstacle and watching them grow and develop. I will tell you from a personal standpoint, we've gotten off to a heck of a start this year and captured a number of new clients, global clients that with really, really big firms. And we're super proud and pleased with that. It sends a very positive tone for the rest of the year. Let's hope we can keep the momentum up.
John, as always, a pleasure. We can't wait to see you again. You become a regular on the Medical Sales Podcast, and every time you show up, you're always bringing us new news. So thank you so much for the information and the pearls of wisdom today, and we can't wait to see you again.
Samuel, thank you so much. I enjoy it. I know we have a shared value in helping other people, and I think that's why we get along so well.
And that was John Crowder. You know, I love having him on because this is the kind of stuff you got to hear. This is the kind of stuff that's going to move you forward. You know, our company is called Evolve Your Success for a reason, because no matter how successful you think you are, there's always the next level of evolution. And it's the stuff that we discussed today that's going to get you there. If you're listening and you want to get into medical sales, or you're in medical sales and you want to be better, then you already know I'm going to tell you, go to evolveyoursuccess.com and get access to us, and let's get you to where you want to be. And something I don't say enough, and I'm going to start saying every episode, is if you love what you're listening to, if you love this information, you love our guests, you like the sound of my voice, then make sure you subscribe to the Medical Sales Podcast. As always, we do our best to bring you innovative guests that are doing things differently in the medical sales space. So make sure you tune in next week for another episode of the Medical Sales Podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And remember, I have a customized and personalized program that gets you into the medical technology industry as a sales professional, or any type of role for that matter. Become a top performer in your position and masterfully navigate your career to executive level leadership. Check out these programs and learn more at evolveyoursuccess.com by visiting our site, filling out an application, schedule some time with one of our account executives, and allowing us to get you where you need to be. Stay tuned for more awesome content with amazing interviews on the Medical Sales Podcast.